Bum-ba-da-dum! Howdy, welcome to BanjoBenClark.com. I'm your host, Banjo Ben, on the website that teaches you how to play guitar, banjo, and mandolin. I'm glad that you joined me today. Had a couple students recommend that I try to teach a Shady Grove version in Doc Watson's style, so I set out to do that, but then I realized this could be a much bigger lesson, and indeed it is. This is a huge lesson. We're not only going to learn a version of Doc playing this song, but we're going to strip it down to his basic melody and try to learn how he built up to what he played, okay? So this is a big old lesson. It's about a 30-minute video lesson over there on the website. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, here in a moment, I'll ask you to come over to the website. You can join as a Gold Pick member. You can have access to hundreds of videos like this. Not only videos, but I also have tabs. So I've got the exact tab of what I just played in both PDF and TEF file formats. But then I'll also have 3 different speeds of guitar rhythm MP3s that you can download and practice along with. And then we spend about 8 or 10 minutes at the end of the video, end of the lesson, talking about how to play rhythm for this. And I give you some little clues that Doc would use in his bass notes whenever he walks around and stuff. It's just a great lesson. I'd be honored to have you on board, as many of you have. Let's dive into Shady Grove in D minor. Let's learn a really fun Doc Watson style version of Shady Grove in the key of D minor. Now, it would be fun just to learn the Doc version, but I thought what would be a much more valuable endeavor for us is if we took Doc's version, stripped it down to the very, very basic melody, look at what that is, and then we're going to build it up just a little bit by adding some hammer-ons. And then we're going to launch into Doc's version. This way, maybe we can see what was going on in Doc's head as he thought about what to play over this chord progression. And speaking of chord progression, we're in D minor, which is a relative minor key of F major. So a lot of the chords that you would play in the key of F, you're going to see in this D minor. There's really only 4 chords that Doc uses, and he plays a different chord progression than some other folks like Tony that I've heard. He's got a D minor, he plays a C, he also plays the F, so the relative major, and then he also plays an A minor 7, which is a C chord without the ring finger. Okay, and those are the 4 chords that he's going in and out of, and I've got another video here on the site where I teach you some tips on how to play backup rhythm to this song, so we'll cover all of that there. Now, let's strip the melody all the way down. Let's go ahead and throw up the first line of the tab, which shows the basic melody, and just a couple notes here. You'll notice that beneath each one of the notes, I have little black pick arrow directions. So like there in measure 1, we got down arrows. That would mean a down stroke with our pick hand. An up arrow would mean an up stroke. And these are pretty simple rhythms until we get into Doc's, which gets a little bit more syncopated. But here we've pretty much just got quarter notes, half notes, and eighth notes. Now the melody doesn't start until the second measure on that open D string. Okay, so we've got 2 little pickup notes in the first measure. They start on the A string on the 3rd beat, and then a 3rd fret. Then we get into the melody here in measure 2. Okay, and we're going to use a little rhythm to play these long notes that's kind of pervasive in Doc's version. That's this little shuffle fiddle rhythm. It sounds like this. So it's a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, quarter note, 2 eighth notes. And that's what measure 2 is. So Shady Grove, my little love. So measure 3, we're going, my little love. We play 2 quarter notes first. One's on the 2nd fret of the D string, then an open D string, then land on the 3rd fret of the A string. And then measure 4, Shady Grove, I know. Okay, so we're just going to follow, I'm a horrible singer, but we're going to try to follow up that melody in measure 4. It starts with a quarter note, 2 more eighth notes, then 2nd fret on the D string, open G string. Now let me just, to give us context, I'm going to play slowly through measures 1 through 4. Just remember that on the site I have another video segment where I play the whole thing through very, very slowly, so don't get frustrated if you lose me here. Now when we get to measure 5, Shady Grove I know, we've got this long melody note on the A, this A note, second fret of the G string. So we're going to go back to that fiddle shuffle pattern. And measure 6, the way that Doc presents the melody, Shady Grove, my little love. So we're just going to follow that, starting out with some quarter notes. So second fret of the G string in measure 6, third fret of the B, first fret of the B, back to the second fret of the G. My little love, measure 7 is just coming right down a C chord. That's what I'm going to make. G string, second fret of D string, third fret of A. And then I'm bound to go away is how he presents it. So measure 8, second fret of the D string, open G, and then a couple eighth notes, second fret, open, back to the second fret. So measures 5 through 8 slowly sound like this. Good. Now when we get to measure 9, we're just going to land on the open D string, and that's halfway through the break. And so what I thought we'd do here is the second half of the break, before we get into Docs, we're going to take the exact same melody that we just played, okay? But when we have opportunity to, we're going to add some hammer-ons. You see a couple of them there in measures 11 and 12. And this starts leading us toward what Doc does in his break, which we'll get much more in depth into. So much of it's the same, and I invite you to print out the tabs so that you can refer back to these measures with me as I refer back to them. We've got those two little pickup notes at the end of measure 9, just like we did at the very beginning. Measure 10 is exactly the same as its corresponding measure in measure 2, Shady Grove. But then measure 11, we've got my little love. And the way that I wrote it in measure 3, very basic melody, is just a quarter note on the second fret, quarter note, half note. But there, with the second fret, we have an opportunity to hammer into it and just to give it a little bit more spice, a little bit more depth. And so that's what we're going to do here. Instead of just, we're going to hammer on the first note. So that means we just play the D string open, hammer onto it with our middle finger, then the open D string down to that third. Measure 12, the original basic melody sounded like this. So we're going to do the same type of idea here. We're going to hammer on to that second fret instead of just playing the quarter note, so it sounds like this, measure 12. Okay, so that just adds a little bit of depth, as I mentioned. Let me just start with the pickup notes at the end of measure 9 and play this. So we already see how it's starting to make the basic melody grow a little bit. As we get into measure 13, same type of thing. Back at measure 5, its corresponding measure, we just started right there with the quarter note on the second fret. This time we're going to hammer instead of the quarter note and then go into that shuffle pattern. Measure 14, it starts out the same, but then we're going to hammer on this time again to the second fret. Then measure 15, instead of just coming down that C chord, we're going to hammer on that middle finger. That just adds some complexity and just some really tasty sounding stuff. In the measure 16, same type of thing. I'm going to substitute a quarter note, second fret, that we saw back in measure 8 with a hammer on it. Okay, measures 13 through 16, just to give you some context. Good. Now when we get to measure 17, we've wrapped up that break, and so I'm going to land on my D string, strum the D minor chord twice, come down to my A string, and then that last beat of measure 17 with that slide is where Doc's version starts, and that's where we're going to go in the next video.